Mattie's name is Mattis. They call her Matler in Yiddish. She's named after her uncle Mattis, who was killed in Russia during the war.
Well, so, what year was this about?
Well, Mattie was born in 1920, so he must have been killed in 1919, something like that. Anyhow, now my grandparents, my three uncles, Uncle Henry, Uncle Sam, and Uncle Gershon, and they all pack up, and my mother and Mattie, the baby of 3 months, and they all pack up and they go to Ponevezh.
How come now? It's safe because there are no Russian troops there, or what?
I think it was never safe, but they were wanting to get out of Russia and that terrible cold. And how did they survive there? My grandmother started baking bread. They'd be up at 2, 3 in the morning baking bread to sell so that they could earn some money. And my mother had to go to the hospital to work. Can you imagine the hardship? Anyway, they now get on a train to go to Ponevezh. And as the troop movements come through the stations, their train is shunted onto a sideline and the troops get first preference. It took them 3 weeks to get to Ponevezh with all the shunting off the main line. And they had to...
Who were the Russians fighting at the time?
Who were they fighting?
The Germans.
In 1920, no, it was the Russian Revolution.
Oh.
The Russians were fighting the Russians. They were fighting against the Tsar.
But that was 1917, wasn't he overthrown?
The war was 1914 and 1918. But the Russian Revolution was after that. And Mattie was born in 1920. It was the time of the Russian Revolution. And naturally they all wanted to get out of Russia with the revolution going on. So they eventually reached Ponevezh. And my parents were reunited, and my grandparents and her sons, they had found a place to live. Don't ask me how they survived because it was such a hardship. My grandfather was a yeshiva bocher. You know what that is? All he did was study the Torah. And my grandmother was 7 children, one had already died, 7 children, but my sisters, 2 sisters had got married and they went to live with their husbands in Poland. So
your 2 sisters? Not
my mother's 2 sisters. Alan's got the photo of my mother as a 12-year-old and her 2 sisters and the grandparents. And he's also got a photo of my grandparents and my sister Mattie and my 3 uncles and myself, and I was a little girl of 6, and there I was with a
that's what I sent to you.
But did you have you seen that photo?
I've sent it to everyone.
Good. Anyway, so now they're back in Ponevezh. So how did my grandmother survive? She used to...
Ma, you haven't seen?
Yes, thanks. She used to hire an orchard, say an orchard growing plums, or pears, or apples, mainly apples. And she used to pay them, the people who owned the orchard, a certain amount of money, and then she had the right to the fruit. So she used to pick the fruit and sell the fruit. She earned some money from that. And then she used to put the apples in her loft above the house where they lived. Whenever we went to visit my grandparents, there was a wonderful smell of apples. The apples were in the loft. And in the winter, when you couldn't get any apples, she got good prices for her apples. And we always used to go to my visit.
Yeah, do you want a beer?
She used to go and visit we used to go, the 3 little girls, to visit my grandparents on Hanukkah. It was freezing cold. We wore thick woolen stockings and coats. And the woolen stockings were, my mother knitted, they were pink and they were itchy like hell. I've never forgotten. And then we walking miles to my grandparents. Why? Because we could get Hanukkah geld. You know, Hanukkah, you're supposed to give gifts to your children. So my grandparents used to give us money. So, money was very scarce, I promise you.
Wow. It's real guilt.
What else? I don't know what else.
What was the reason for your migration to South Africa?
My father didn't have a profession. He was, you know,